video, our group will be presenting the accounting financial instrument, which is a financial liability and financial equity based on the article about financial reporting for employee stock options, liability or equity, by Mary E. Paul, Leslie D. Hodder, and Stephen R. Steuben. Definition for financial liabilities. According to the FASB's current conceptual framework, financial liabilities are defined as probable future sacrifices of a firm's asset arising from a present obligation, which rests primarily on two factors: the existence of a present obligation and the requirement to transfer the firm's asset in settlement. However, this definition of liabilities is subject to criticism because determining whether a present obligation exists is subjective, and because the form of settlement is subject to structuring. The FASB and IASB have had a joint project to improve the board's conceptual framework with a focus on improving the definitions of financial statement elements, including liabilities. For financial equity refers to the portion of a company's asset that is owned by shareholders or investors. It represents the residual interest in the assets of the company after all liabilities have been paid off. Financial equity can be represented by common stock, preferred stock, or other equity instruments. It is an important measure of a company's financial health and is used by investors to evaluate the potential return on their investment.
Financial equities have several characteristics including: first, ownership. Financial equity represents ownership in a company, giving shareholders the right to vote on important company decisions and receive a portion of the company's profits. Second, residual claim. Shareholders have a residual claim on the company's assets, meaning they are entitled to a portion of the company's assets after all liabilities have been paid off. Third, variable returns. The value of financial equity can fluctuate based on the performance of the company and market conditions, resulting in variable returns for shareholders. Next, no maturity date. Financial equity does not have maturity date, meaning it can remain outstanding indefinitely. Fifth, the subordinate to debt. Financial equity is subordinate to debt in terms of priority of payment, meaning that debt holders are paid first in the event of bankruptcy or liquidation. Lastly, limited liability. Shareholders have limited liability, meaning they are not personally responsible for the company's debts or obligations beyond their investment in the company. Next, financial liabilities have several characteristics including: first, present obligation. Financial liabilities arise from a present obligation that the entity has to transfer economic resources to another party. Second, probable future sacrifice of economic resources. The entity is expected to make a future sacrifice of economic resources such as cash or other assets to settle the obligation. Third, transfer of economic resources. The entity is required to transfer economic resources to another party to settle the obligation. Fourth, legal or constructive obligation. The obligation can arise from a legal contract or from a constructive obligation, which is an obligation that arises from past events or actions. Fifth, fixed or determinable amount. The amount of the obligation is fixed or determinable, meaning that it can be measured with reasonable accuracy. Sixth, time frame for settlement. The obligation has a time frame for settlement, which can be short term, which is within 1 year, or long term, which is more than 1 year. And lastly, interest or other costs. Financial liabilities may also include interest or other costs associated with the obligation, such as fees or penalties. Overall, financial liabilities represent a claim on the entity's economic resources that must be settled in the future, and they are an important component of the entity's financial position and performance.
Next is distinguishing between equity and liabilities. The distinction between the equity and liability is a complex issue that has been the subject of much debate and discussion in the accounting and finance community. The current definition of liability is based on the existence of present obligation and the requirement to transfer the firm's asset in the settlement. However, this definition is subjective and has been criticized for being difficult to apply to complex financial instruments. One proposed approach to distinguish between equity and liability is the basic ownership approach, which would classify as equity only common stock and classify all other claims against the firm asset as liabilities. However, This approach has been criticized for failing to reflect the risk and return characteristics of non-basic ownership claims and for resulting in an artificially narrow set of equities that decrease the usefulness of the balance sheet. An alternative approach is to classify claims based on their association with common equity risk and return. This approach could result in departure from current GAAP, but it could provide a more accurate reflection of the risk and return characteristic of different types of claim. Next one is problem arise related to the issue. One problem related to the issue discussed in the article is the lack of the consensus about the characteristics that distinguish liabilities and equity, which is reflected in current accounting standards relating to financial instruments. Another problem is the subjective nature of determining whether a present obligation exists and the requirement to transfer the firm asset in settlement, which is the primary factor in defining liabilities. Additionally, there is a debate about whether employee stock options should be classified as liabilities or equity, with different rationale supporting each classification.
Approaches used by the standard setter for the problem arise is: one approach is to require companies to disclose the fair value of employee stock option in the footnotes to the financial statement. This approach provides investors with information about the potential dilution of their ownership interest in the company and the potential impact of the option on the company's financial performance. Another approach is to require companies to recognize the fair value of employee stock option as an expense in the income statement. This approach is intended to provide investors with a more accurate picture of the company's financial performance and to align accounting standard economic reality. However, this approach has been controversial, as some argue that it overstates the cost of employee stock option and can lead to a reduction in the use of stock option as a form of compensation. The FASB has also considered alternative approaches such as requiring companies to classify employee stock option as liabilities or equity based on their economic characteristic rather than their legal form. This approach would require a more nuanced analysis of the nature of the option and their impact on the company's financial position and performance. Overall, the FASB has sought to balance the need for the transparency and accuracy in financial reporting with the practical consideration of implementing accounting standards that are understandable and useful to investors and other stakeholders. For the conclusion, the article tells us that employee stock options share characteristics more aligned with equity rather than liabilities. Employee stock options were associated with lower common equity risk and expected return. Then factors such as volatility, measures, and expected cost of capital show a negative association with the extent of outstanding option. The terms of option and their remaining maturity impact their risk-reducing characteristic. Furthermore, treating option as equity rather than liabilities had a stronger positive relation with common equity risk. The sensitivity of option value to asset changes resemble equity value and differ from liabilities. Employee stock option as exhibited higher risk and expected return compared to company equity. Last but not least, the article supports classifying employee stock option as a type of equity rather than liabilities. This insight contributes to financial reporting discussion and validate warrant pricing theory.